Hello and welcome to another My NT ND marriage video. I recently saw the movie I Used to Be Famous, starring Leo Long. And he is actually autistic, so an actually autistic actor. I don't know how many else are out there, but he's the first that I've ever heard of who is actually autistic. So we've got like Sheldon Cooper, for example, a character on The Big Bang Theory who isn't actually autistic. He's just an actor playing somebody who is autistic. And in fact, when I was watching the show, I didn't even know that he was meant to be autistic because I didn't know anything about autism to know that he was meant to be autistic. I just thought he was obsessive compulsive and just a genius who was not very good with people and a little bit obnoxious. And who else is there? There's that comedian, the Australian comedian, I can't think of her name, who played somebody who works in an office who was on the spectrum. And I did know about the spectrum by the time that show came out. However, I've never seen it, but apparently she does a good job. And then there's that attorney Wu, something like that. I've only seen the sort of start of that series. And already I can say that she isn't like my husband or my son. And that's what I found really fascinating about Leo Long in the movie I Used to Be Famous. He's very, very similar to how my son is. It's the first time I've ever seen somebody on TV who is even remotely representative of my son. Because my son can be a little bit abrupt, a little bit blunt. In saying that, I found that Leo Long was actually quite sort of nice and sweet in his deliveries of his blunt sentences, whereas my son can come across as condescending and rude. So we're working on Where's Wally jigsaws at the moment, which is super ironic because somebody left a comment on one of my previous videos about Wally jigsaws, Waldo they call them, and we do them together. And he'll go off and do his thing and then come back and see the progress that I've made with the jigsaw, and it doesn't matter how much progress I've made, I can be nearly done. And he will come out with statements like, is that all you've done? Oh, you finally found that piece. When are you going to do this part? How come you haven't done that part? I'm surprised that you haven't been able to finish it yet. It was kind of negative comments about my progress on the jigsaw. He doesn't come out and say anything positive like, wow, you've done so much, you've done a good job. Nothing like that. So he's blunt in his deliveries, but he does come across as a little bit rude and condescending, whereas Leo Long and his character in the show, he didn't. He sort of had this nice sort of sweetness about him. And that can be an upbringing thing. I mean, keep in mind who the parents are of my son. Maybe we've rubbed off on him a little bit, so, you know, these things are possible. There's also a movie called The Phantom Thread, starring Daniel Day-Lewis. And that movie there is the closest that I found to the portrayal of how my husband is in TV. My husband can be very sort of grumpy, dictatory, lose his temper, fly off the top of his head at the drop of a hat. And I felt that Daniel played that part quite well. Now in that movie, it is never said that he is on the spectrum. It's just that I was watching it and went, wow, I recognise those characteristics. And by the time I'd seen that movie, I did know about autism spectrum and that you have like a wide range of differences in how affected they are. Because even love on the spectrum, those people to me, meaning no disrespect as I say this, but those people to me are noticeably on the spectrum. You can tell by listening to them talk and things like this, they have mental development conditions. You can see that. Whereas when you see my son and my husband and talk to them, you would really have no idea unless you knew them well. So I'd never found people who had represented my family well in cinema. And so when I saw Phantom Thread, and this guy starts losing his temper, and he's a genius. I mean, he's obviously very good at his craft, he's very skilled. But he has like zero tolerance. Now granted, well, without doing any spoilers, he struggles to sit and eat with people and listen to the sounds of eating. You know, cutlery, chewing, crunching, things like that. And he does get quite ropeable about that. That isn't like my husband. He's the noisy eater, to be honest. However, it is like our son. He can't stand the whole sound around food and eating, to the point where he will often come out after we've finished eating to eat with us. To eat without us. Because the sounds of everything, like knife scraping on a plate and things, really bother him. However, our son doesn't have the temper that my husband has. So that was the thing that really stood out for me in the Phantom Thread. The way that the guy lost his temper and got really angry. That was the thing that stood out to me, that was very similar to how my husband operates, and the types of things that trigger him, and how he operates in his business with how good he is at his work and everything like this. Although I do think that the guy was getting angry with his workers and things, whereas my husband wouldn't do that. He would never show that side of himself to the public. So back to Leo Long. It was really nice to see somebody actually autistic being in a movie. I feel like it's definitely an underrepresented area of our living. I mean, that being said, Australia is so far behind when it comes to things like this, and probably America is up there with how behind Australia is. England's a little bit more on top of things, in that English people will still put people with disabilities in their shows. I mean, Australia, I can't even think of any time that we saw somebody disabled. So in Home and Away, for example, I'm not even sure there's been an Aboriginal character on Home and Away. It took them ages before there was an Asian character in Home and Away. I've never seen anybody in a wheelchair, somebody blind, somebody... Did they have somebody with Down syndrome? I don't even think they've done that. So Australia is very underrepresented with the types of disabilities and things that we show in shows. And if there are any out there that you've seen, please comment below. I'm curious to know if there have been and I just missed them. I mean, I don't watch a huge amount of telly. But autism in particular, I think, is very underrated when it comes to representation of anybody. You hardly ever see it, you hardly ever hear about it. It's why people such as myself had no idea that my son and my husband even had the condition. I just didn't know that it existed. I mean, I knew that autism existed, but not the spectrum thing. I didn't know that there were ranges that you could get, and that somebody could be at this end of the range and somebody could be at that end of the range, and then anywhere in the middle. And then anywhere on those ranges, you've got all these different personality traits to go along with them. I had no idea that any of that existed. And I think that it's because it just isn't shown anywhere. It's not talked about. It's not an open topic. Although that is changing, and we are starting to talk about it more. We are starting to get representation, which means that the public learn more about it. Because at the moment, vast majorities of people would be in the dark about it, because not having known about it, you would just never know about it. So it's really good to see this young actor in a movie playing an autistic person, and he is actually autistic, so he does a fabulous job at it. Like the facial expressions and things, I mean, so similar to my son. It's really cute. Yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. It was a very nice, warm, feel-good movie. And you had to get the tissues out a little bit here and there because it was just so sweet. But I was really glad to see that representation in the movies, showing somebody who is actually autistic. And as I've said before, I don't know many actors who are on the spectrum who are in movies. I had wondered if there were, but I've never heard that there are. Anyway, leave a comment below if you have found a show or a sitcom or anything like that that you feel represented your autistic traits quite well. Do you know of other autistic actors out there? Comment below, love to hear from you. And thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. I really do appreciate it.